All right. Um, all right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the OpenJS Foundation's Cross Project Council meeting. Today is May 27th, and let's get things started. Do we have any announcements?
Uh, One for the maintainers, we have early bird discount ticket set aside. If you are an act for JSConf, so if you are an active maintainer of one of our hosted projects, give us a shout and we'll give you that code for that early bird discount.
Great.
Mhm.
And of course, if you're a maintainer, this was posted in the Slack channels. So if you're not already, and you're watching this, join our OpenJS Slack. Cool. Any other announcements? If not, we'll go on to the next item. The board meeting is happening this week. So I don't know if we have any updates from the board, but certainly if anybody has anything that they'd like us to bring to the board, please let us know.
Board happened last Friday.
Oh, did it really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's right. Oh, I wasn't feeling well. That's why.
You
Okay,
were
never
sick?
mind.
Yeah.
So then let me rephrase that. Do we have any updates from the board?
Um, Well, I think it'd be good for us to share with the regular members the slide. So why don't we work on that? So,
Okay. Yeah, it sounds good. That's
okay.
funny. Totally slipped my mind.
Yeah.
Uh, good. All right. Moving on then. Do we know if we have anything from these um, waiting on labels here? The first one is the waiting on legal, which is the loopback exemption, which I don't have an update on. That's kind of on my plate. Um, Nothing on staff updates, and nothing on website updates. So I think the only thing is that loopback thing that I talked to Ben about actually, I think last week. So we're going to try to make progress on the loopback stuff. Great. So that allows us to jump into the agenda. The first item on the list is 1472. Claudio opened this up a couple of days ago. Resources GitHub's Dev Connect program. I don't think Claudio is on. Nope. So if anybody knows anything about this, please feel free to jump in. Uh, this is the, whoops, dang it, where did it go? This is the issue here. Um, it looks like there's a program that GitHub's doing that could help provide support for Node.js Collaborator Summit with funding, GitHub Swag, access to GitHub Offices, and other resources. So,
That's
uh,
great. We have resources as well. So I think we'll just pool the resources. So if you're a project at OpenJS, we have $3,000 set aside for the same things. We often work with community, like corporate members and just sort of friendly companies who do host us. So that's great that we'll sort of put that in our toolkit. And then maybe we can work with Abby from GitHub to sort of kind of blend the two. So
yeah, yeah, sounds good.
it's awesome.
All right, great.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Um, so the next item here, something that I opened up as we worked through some of the remaining code of conduct outstanding items, in terms of our process and documentation and everything. And something that has come up a couple of times, many times actually over the course of our foundation, and I feel like we've discussed this a lot, but I don't see this like really documented anywhere. This is essentially like information sharing between a project and the foundation. Um, and so I think, this is a discussion that we need to have and decide what it is. Code of conduct reports are private and confidential, so it's not something that we take lightly in terms of considering information sharing. But the thinking is if there is some sort of bad actor who's behaving poorly in one project and is doing the same things in another project, that sort of information would be good to know. Um, so I don't know if this is a discussion for right here and right now, or a working session, or maybe we get through the agenda and can kind of revisit this. But I certainly welcome folks to comment on the issue and have some conversation there. We'd like to figure out when it would make sense to share any information, if at all, and then document that clearly so that so that it's there in public. So, all right, something to think about, and we will talk more about either later today or sometime soon. The next item, this is just kind of remaining open. There is the issue is what version of the contributor covenant of code of conduct should we use? I think we've all agreed that the version 3 is something worth waiting for. Some of us have even worked with the team who's developing it to give some feedback from the cross project council. And I spoke with one of the folks who was working on it, trying to get a timeline for the effort, and I think that it's a bit open-ended, but they brought up they thought that having a timeline would be good for them to move things forward. And one thing that we discussed was having it in place well before our event later this year. So the suggestion is maybe like by August 1st, they have, things buttoned up and the new version 3 released. So I'll find out more and see if that date is something that works for them. But the thinking is it'd be great if we had it in place, could update all of our documentation, kind of wrap up the remaining items of our code of conduct process and policies work. And then additionally give us time to communicate with our projects and kind of just do that cascading work as well. So once I get confirmation or just generally hear back from the group when they're targeting to be done, I will update that issue and we can move along. Cool. Next item is this issue 1425, proposal to add a services.md or similar documentation to OpenJS projects. I feel like we've talked about this a bunch. What am I seeing? Oh, I think we were waiting for Rudd, who commented 12 hours ago and I believe is on the call. Rudd, do you want to summarize your well-written comment here for the group?
Sure, thanks, Joe. Howdy, folks. This is regarding having a services MD file that been proposed to capture the various service providers that hosted projects are using as part of their development infrastructure and to support their projects. So the item was brought to the security collab space because for an opinion on implementation detail to do this in like a safe, reasonable way that would be hopefully satisfactory to project maintainers because of the potential sensitivity of the aggregate of this information. There was a discussion much like the comments in the issue, went kind of a lot of different directions. And the general sentiment, to summarize it really briefly, is that some projects are going to feel like this information is fine to store in a public place, and some projects are not going to be okay with storing this information in a public location. So the consensus was that we really just need to be flexible on this and give projects the freedom to choose how they would like to store this file. If we would like to maximize for adherence to the policy without a lot of additional discussion. So basically, that kind of introduces some interesting challenges, and I'm looking forward to hearing feedback from Ben and Robin in particular, because given that we're talking about giving projects this flexibility on where exactly they put it, public or private, and where they put it in their own repo structures to best suit them and their own governance model. That might introduce some inconsistencies in how the foundation folks that are supposed to be getting notified of changes and track changes on these documents get that. But yeah, the general consensus was basically like we need to give people the ability to put this in a public location or a private location, and just make sure that they notify the right folks when the document exists, and do so in a way that they can be notified when there's document changes. There's another aspect of it related to notifying folks like Ben when projects are also looking to starting to look for partnerships or looking at services, but that isn't necessarily a repository documentation thing, and is more related to just making sure they're contacting the right folks. And that's also covered in the policy, but that's pretty straightforward and simple. Any thoughts on that?
I think you missed some of the discussion we had earlier. I think, Michael, you had sort of pointed out that this information is pretty obvious to find anyhow, so we may as well make it
Yeah.
public. It's nice for particularly the folks who are providing sponsored services, um, which I like, and sort of that transparency. But there's one project in particular, I don't know, I think oftentimes we have policies and then we can break them on a case by case basis, and I'm okay with that as well, if the project feels strongly, so.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
the last discussion, as I remember it, was, yeah, generally, like I can see a lot of it may be obvious, but like we can understand the security concerns, so that's why we were kind of asking for the security, punting it to the security working group to say like, well, what's your recommendations?
frankly, just for transparency, I fell on the side of the argument that this information should be private. That's the former intelligence analyst in me who always valued open source to save time and trouble, even if, yes, we could do it ourselves. But at the same time, there was feedback from folks and like was just said, this information is likely discoverable if someone really wanted to go through the effort, but there are offset concerns about the ease of doing so to reduce friction to doing things. So that's why we're just going to offer folks the flexibility, and we can see how projects implement this policy and do refinements as this meets reality, I think.
Okay. What are next steps on this?
Well, I put the markdown version in the issue itself. There's also a link to a GDoc if you all prefer to do inline comments on big ideas or just how things are phrased right now more easily. So I think just looking for you all's feedback. This is also going to go to Security Cloud Space to get their line item feedback as well. But I wanted to just present it here first for you all to have a chop and give the feedback from y'all's perspective. So that's pretty much where we're at.
Great. All right. Well, I encourage folks to, read through that issue and particularly Rudd's comment there or the GDoc, if you prefer, and help us refine that and keep it moving forward. Thanks, Rudd.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks to Rudd and the folks on the security group. Appreciate it.
I have another item if you wouldn't, it's very similar to this around the continuity policy for NPM. If we wouldn't
Yeah.
mind maybe skipping to that one.
Yeah, no problem. I'm gonna take it and post it in the right order on the agenda. And now it's official that is the next issue. Go ahead, Rudd.
Awesome. So there was also an ask around a continuity policy related to package registries. In practice, this policy right now is exclusively focused on NPM. There's absolutely room to include other package registries in the future, but really NPM is like the primary target for this, and we can go forth and be awesome just focusing on that first. And depending on based on feedback and how we see that goes, we can then iterate to expand the scope to other package registries if we wish. The idea here and the continuity policy here was based in structure and a concept very strongly on the GitHub continuity policy that's already in place. The idea here is that there would also be that sort of account continuity with the NPM packages that projects are running. In terms of implementation detail here, there are a couple different options. If it depends on how the project themselves are managing their access to their packages. So if the project is using an NPM organization to put all of their packages together under an umbrella and manage access that way, it's relatively straightforward for Robin, Ben, or others to be given access to those that organization. The policy, I'll get into one of those things in a second. The other option is if they're not using an NPM organization and they're just granting access directly on packages themselves, that's the other option in the policy that's covered as well. If there's other approaches that should be covered, I'd appreciate smarter people's thoughts and feedback if another option is necessary. In terms of account security for this, in terms of like security for this granting Robin and Ben access to all of these NPM packages, which is pretty scary, is an idea that we'll create separate accounts for each project so that the credentials for those accounts will be stored in a 1Password vault. And that way, Robin and Ben's own NPM accounts don't have like universal access to everything and making their accounts like really good targets for hackers. And so we'll have that kind of authorization and authentication isolation between the projects. Wes.
Yeah. Hey, so I'm fine if it's a compromise and if there's pushback from projects on it, but I think that our ideal is everybody sets up an org. I don't see how even adding a service account is not additional risk that we should just at least try to avoid. Like, I understand maybe there's some reason why, maybe somebody will come back and say, hey, we're not going to do that. Right. And then we have to discuss with them what the reason is so we understand. But I don't think that seems likely. So I would rather us just like push folks to create an org because it just avoids the whole problem. I don't know how people think about that. maybe other folks have seen pushback already on creating an org that I'm not aware of.
Chris?
Um, yeah, so I think it's important that we do not push maintainers to do something and give them the option. This was this is something I felt sort of fairly strongly about when we were working on this was I don't want to have to say, oh, in order to be in compliance with this continuity policy, you must now shift your NPM structure by adding an organization or stuff like that. We should meet folks where they are. And if that's that they have an organization already, great. And if not, we shouldn't have to make them add one. Um, Now, that being said, what I don't understand from the comments you just made, Wes, is what you said it like avoid it solves some problem. What did you mean? What problem is solved by that versus not
Yeah.
adding the
Okay. Yeah. So two main things. One is obviously just increasing the number of accounts with published rights. Obviously, since we would be doing individual accounts, we limit the scope as much as we can, but there's no way to add a person account. Let's call it an account. There's no way to add an account onto a package without it being a publisher directly, but you can add a account into an org without it being a publisher. You can even be an admin without being a publisher, right? In an NPM
Sure.
org. So it avoids having another badge on that page, another account that is a target for attack,
Well,
right?
but
Um,
well, I mean, let me interject though. But if you add them and they're not a publisher, they can make themselves a publisher. It's an extra step, but if the account is compromised, they have the same access either way.
that's true. It would take another step, and it's not. So then this. Okay, here's my second point. Actually, then,
Like I don't imagine Robin
it,
sitting there fat fingering a new NPM publish. You know what
oh
I
no
mean?
no no
Like
no no no
on
no
a
no no no
package.
no.
So
I'm not trying to imply that or any of that. Yeah, totally get that. So here's the second point. It's visible if it's a direct ad. It's not visible if it is in an org. So it makes it a target. So so for example, every time we add somebody, I get notifications from socket.dev and Tidelift when a new publisher is added, and that new publisher then would become, because it's visible, would become a target. Whereas
okay,
just being secret is, I know security by obscurity is not a real thing. Like I get
right.
that, and you're right. But and also we're going to talk about it on these calls. So like somebody just has to go watch the recording. I get that, uh, but at least it adds one more hurdle that is not there when you just have it literally front and center on the npm package page.
I see. Okay. Two things. One, I think that's an important detail that you mentioned, and I think that if it's not there, we may want to spell that out in the policy that if you do this and you are not using, adding someone to an org and instead directly to the package, they are then listed and all that. I think that's helpful context for folks to have. Um, and but that being said, I still think that the decision of how to proceed should be left to the maintainers. The other thing I'll point out is that I don't know, I don't want to put my foot in my mouth, but probably most of the OpenJS projects do have NPM orgs rather than just directly a package. Um, and the ones that don't do orgs are probably the ones that have like only one or two maintainers. Um, but then I guess now that I say that, then that's probably going to be mostly who this applies to because other orgs probably just going to opt out. Like Express would probably just opt out due to the governance that exists, right? Things like Node are probably going to opt out of this. So the folks that this will impact, I guess, in the broad sense, would be the ones that are less likely to have an organization. But anyway, Adam has hand up.
Yeah, I think this is a really good call out. And I appreciate Wes you saying this because I actually was wondering the same thing about this, and so I think you're absolutely right. It should be mentioned in the policy. Um, I wonder if another solution here is like right now we don't really have a lot of data to know how this is actually going on and like how many folks might actually not be running NPM orgs. What my takeaway here actually is that ensuring that NPM orgs are used should probably be an item we add to the compliance guide. And then the policy can be updated to say, like, we really strongly recommend you take this approach. However, if you're not using NPM orgs, here's how you should do it. But we really think you should be using NPM orgs and put them on a roadmap to making that transition. But in the interim, they're adhering to the policy while they can, so we can decouple that kind of improvement from adherence to the policy itself in the short term.
Yeah, the other thing that makes it harder to, I do have this sort of blanket, like, well, we don't want to like force people to change how they're doing stuff. And I do feel fairly strongly about that. But the other unfortunate thing is that organization and team management and NPM is a little bit not intuitive, shall we say. It's kind of confusing. I feel like every time I have to go in there and do something, I have to like relearn the quirks of it. And it's
I
just
did have
sort
to
of
write an entire doc and spend like days going through the docs, and I was still wrong because NPM's own docs did not
yeah. And then
fully cover
it's also
everything.
confusing because there's like different stuff with the CLI, with the the publishers or the authors or whatever term they use there. And so it's just a little bit messy. So it makes it a little bit harder to for me anyway to say like, hey, you should use this thing because it's great and here's why. Because it's like, well, you're gonna have some pain to go along with this anyway. But uh, we can move on. I think Wes had to drop anyway.
Yeah. All right. Well, Rudd added his comments last week on this particular issue. So I encourage folks to, go to the issue and comment there as well and can keep working on it. Cool. Great. Somebody have anything else? You good?
I just wanted to say thanks for the feedback in advance, folks. And yeah, if you have any questions, you're not sure about stuff, just toss it in the comments and we can just work through it.
Great.
So I appreciate it in advance. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rudd. Appreciate all your work. Right on. Next item is 1417. This is the issue that Michaela pulled together for the remaining code of conduct plan of action here. I think one thing that we are working on is where did we talked about this in the last meeting? And Kate, I know you did an inventory. I'm trying to rack my brain as to where we landed with all that.
I think we decided we were gonna wait on this and try and ensure some continuity across projects. There were kind of a few people who were using different codes of conduct, some people using OpenJS. So we kind of want to wrap up our own version of this code of conduct before we start directing people to change things on their own projects.
Great. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Okay, excellent. Um, okay, so that is the first part of that issue. Let me get back to it. Here it is. That's item number one. And then item number two is the contributor covenant, which we're waiting on, and item number three has its own issue as well. So I'm going to move along because the next issue is the GitHub one, .github repo. So this is issue 1395. Basically, our recommendation as a foundation to our projects is that they should have a .github repo in their org, which will, allow certain policies to propagate to any repos that don't have those policies already explicitly stated. But I think in discussions in the past that there's been, I don't know if there's been full agreement on whether this is something that we should do. I think the challenge. I mean, we can certainly create a dot. We already have a .GitHub repo, and we can add the code of conduct to it there. I think part of the concern that I've heard in the past is that if you do it that way and you rely on the .github repo to propagate all of your policies like that, then you don't have a code of conduct.md file in your root of your repo, which is a common place for folks to look. So I don't know, what we recommend, what we think, thinking this fully through, what we should do and what we should encourage others to do. Megan?
I wanted to inquire about has on saying that looking for code of conduct.md is really common to look for. Has that changed at all since GitHub added the tab on the homepage?
It's a good question, and I'm not sure how we would know for sure. I mean, I think for me, at the very least, if I looked for it and I didn't see it, I would look for the tab or the sidebar. It'll say on the sidebar as well. So, maybe it's not that big of a deal. The other question is if you have the repo down, on your local machine, but still, people can just go to GitHub. I don't know if it's really that big of a concern.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody have any thoughts or comments on this particular thing?
Sorry, which one are we talking about?
We're talking about the .github repo. I know we
Ah.
already advise folks to use that, but we should dog food that as well. And
Yeah, so I don't know that we can resolve this without Toby. And I think it would be something that's better discussed like here in the meeting rather than the async comments back and forth in the issue. Toby, like the way that I read his comments, it seems he feels like strongly about it, which I find kind of surprising, but it might just be how I'm reading it. And yeah, we provided the guide to community health files, they use the GitHub repo, and then when it comes to using it ourselves, for some reason, we're not going to do it. I mean, it's the canonical place to put that stuff. I do see his point about, well, now we've got to, track a separate repo for these things, and he'd like to keep it centralized, which is not an unfair point. But I think at the end of the day, it's better to have that content in the GitHub repo. The other thing that came up in the working session was that beyond just the community health files, using the GitHub repo because it's also if you create a profile page in there, it's also the landing page for the org in GitHub, and that we should also utilize that functionality. And some of the content that right now lives in the CPC README probably moves over there as a more appropriate place. And that can be kind of worked on in tandem with the sort of the stalled effort to revamp the README within the CPC repo itself. So I think these would be good things. I hope that Toby would be open to this. The stakes here aren't like super great one way or the other. I don't think, either way is necessarily wrong, but I do think we should do it. But yeah, I don't think we can resolve without chatting with Toby.
yeah, and just to be clear, I think the intent would be to put the code of conduct in the .github repo and not have a code of conduct explicitly in any of the other OpenJS repos because they would naturally pick them up. And so the idea of things getting like out of sync we would just delete the one that's in, the code of conduct, the MD file.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it would introduce another repo, but it would like in practice help with centralization?
The repo already exists. So I guess we've already incurred the cost of the separate repo, but it's sitting there, I think, empty right now.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And I
But
think
it's also like people are used to the .github repo. It's a thing like it's not something brand new. People know to go there for certain things, and yeah. I don't know. Sorry, Joe, you were
I
talking.
was just going to say that we can link to it from the README of the CPC, as well as the org profile README as well, and just make sure that people are aware where it is. Anyone who's not familiar with that concept.
We also link from the website.
Yeah. So I don't think it's going to get lost or buried or something. I think it'll be there, and it is kind of the most practical way to go, I think, to manage it. So, but I agree. Toby is one of the folks who expressed concern about it, so we need to have Toby in the conversation at a minimum. So I added the label working session to this one too, so we can consider that and some of the other efforts that we take up in our working session work. So all right, no decisions on this today, although I'm gonna just copy this and prepare to send it over to Toby to let him know we're sort of waiting on him to be a part of the conversation. All right, so moving on, the next item is the health check on the NativeScript TSP charter. I am getting this confused with, okay, yeah. So Nathan Walker opened up another issue 2 weeks ago. And that's this issue in particular that I'm dropping in the chat. Oh, wait, sorry. Yeah, okay, no, the link to the PR is there as well. So I recommend folks go over there, take a look, and drop a thumb on either the issue or the PR to help them move their work forward. I know they've been working on this charter for a while and have gotten some input from members of the CPC, and so I think it's in pretty good shape. But we should take a look and approve that, help them to move it forward. The last item is the one that we spoke about earlier, onboarding and post-graduation checklist to match the new COC policy, which we have, on our list of things to do once the contributor version 3 code of conduct drops, and then we can kind of update all of that stuff. So that is it for our main agenda. Two things, we should figure out what we want to do in the working session, and then also we can have a private session for a private item. Any thoughts on the private session? Sorry, on the working session? First thing that comes to mind for me is the README work and the org profile and stuff like that. But let me take a look at what things are labeled for working session. So this is the list of issues. There's code of conduct stuff, the .github repo, migrate project status repo back here is another one that I think is already kind of in progress because I know the Cosmos project was managed in the CPC repo. There's even a couple of older items here that I think we need to revisit and see if they are even needed any longer. The community voting member simplify CPC governance. Anybody have any thoughts? if not, I think the repo README and the org README are probably a good chunk of work. We could, sit down as a group and start to separate that out and see what best belongs where, and yeah, and kind of make some progress on that. Sound good? And then if we can get Toby in on the call too, we could talk about .GitHub repo briefly first, perhaps. All right, cool. So I can stop recording. I think we have members here, regular members and whatnot, so we can get into our private session. So before I stop, thanks everybody if you are watching this or watching it later. As always, feel free to get involved in the work that we're doing. Go to openjsf.org/collaborate to find our calendars and our Slack channel and all that stuff. So thanks. See y'all soon.